KDFC 90.3 San Francisco, KXSC 104.9 FM and HD1 Sunnyvale, KOSC 89.9 Angwin, KDFG 103.9 Seaside, and worldwide at kdfc.com, a listener-supported broadcast service of the University of Southern California, home of the USC Elaine and Kenneth Leventhal School of Accounting.
Hello.
Time for Mozart.
Is there a radio on or something?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, let me turn it off.
Always.
It's funny, every time I want to join, it was muted, and then it's automatically unmuted without my permit.
Yeah.
I don't know what kind of setting I have.
I think by default, whenever I join Zoom, it unmutes me. It never mutes me. I have to go and.
That's it for me.
Yeah, but like I check, it is when I join, it is muted. Like when I opening the email, it unmute me, and I didn't notice. Sorry.
Yeah. Briefly is unmuted, and then as soon as you join, when in my case, when I say join with my computer audio, I think it unmutes me or something like that. So yeah, it's a little bit different compared to Gmeet, where by default it can be muted.
Yeah. Next time I see Eric, when I'll complain to him.
Hello, New Year, guys.
Hey, Steve.
Hey,
How are you doing,
Steve.
Steve?
Let's wait a couple minutes, given that in the last meeting, everyone's having, I mean, not everyone, but the Kochek's having trouble. Oh, okay, let's get started. Guess that's pretty much everyone we have. This is SIG Release, well, Nephew SIG Release Meetings on January 9th, 2023. And it's already recording, so great. So Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome to the meeting.
Yeah, Happy New Year. Yeah.
New Year.
So, well, with a new year, I guess we'll first talk about a little bit of planning. The way we look at that is there are two events that I know two events that we're under negotiations, both of those, in terms of Nephew presence on them. One of them is Mobile World Congress, and the other one that is really up there right now, because I think deadline is this week, so I'm not even sure this is going to happen, is KubeCon Europe, Amsterdam, in April. So, I mean, in a release perspective, it would be great. I'm obviously we're not TSC here, so we can't just say, oh, let's have a release there. But then it would be great if we are lining up perhaps alpha and beta released around those two events. There are, so MWC is the end of February, which is a month and a half away from now. And then April 11th, the week of April 11th is KubeCon. I believe during the ONE summit, Kandan talked about TSC's thinking of a April-May release one. So it seems like even KubeCon is very close to a release that I would imagine having a beta would be a good thing to do at that time. So this is SIG3, not SIG2. So we're not, I guess we're not discussing the content if we actually haven't released there. But I think in a way it's probably makes sense to start lining up some alpha and beta releases around those two events. Those are the two events that I know of that we are trying hard to have a Nephew presence. I don't know if there's anything in between the two that we're joining, but then at this point, as far as I know, there's discussions between Kandans and the Linux Foundations on having at least some sort of party, if anything, in MWC, and then I guess all of you guys see that there's a John and others initiated that there will be that we wanted to have a Nephew day or external events tapping onto or tab on events or whatever they will call onto KubeCon. So I do believe the deadline is this week. So I'm not even sure if we are, even the TSC didn't really talk about it last time. So I'm not actually sure if Kandan and others remember to do this.
That's what I
guess.
Stephen, because it was, it didn't came up in the TSC. So I'm wondering whether it's something or not.
The MWC thing did, right? But then I don't know if KubeCon.
The KubeCon one I'm talking about.
Oh, did it show up? Because I was in the TSC.
No, I
meeting,
did not.
I actually remember.
I was in the meeting. At least I was not seeing or.
Yeah, that's why I didn't see it at that time. Yeah, and I think it was someone from Linux Foundation or John or someone talked about the deadline is either this week or may have already been last week. Hopefully not. So we haven't seen anyone actually taking any actions. Although Kandan said on the Slack that we'll make it happen. So I last time any internal meetings we had with Linux Foundations, I didn't hear anything that raised up either. So hopefully we didn't miss the deadline because everyone's very excited to have a Nephew day during KubeCon next May and then next April or this coming April, and then it coincides very well with our release planning in terms of date and time. So I would like to kind of see that, but then again. Yeah, so those are the two dates that I guess mentally I would hope to we all prepared. If we have, I have to venture to guess, this will probably be the two dates that we would like to align some work. And it's also kind of nice if we don't have to start asking folks to get together to get a focus group 2 weeks before the event, like last time on the ONE summit. So I mean, once John is back, I think us in this SIG would have to sync up I mean, us in this SIG and SIG2 are pretty much the same set of people. So we'll sync up on SIG2 to ensure that we'll pace the content. We'll pace the set of things that we can do around that a week before then. And so that was probably the main things to think about. In terms of what we have, actually, so I would like to introduce Arwen, who's on this call. He's from Google, and he's been actually helping out on PROW and things, and he's actually making it work already on a testNetFlow repo. So well, welcome to community, Arwen. So you can go ahead.
Thank you, Stephen. Hi, everyone. So I've been joining the past few calls across org, automation, and all these calls that you guys have. And can you guys hear me okay? Sorry, I'm joining from my phone.
Yeah, when we can hear you. Yeah.
Oh, okay, perfect. Yeah, so I work along with, Tal, Stephen, and John at Google. And I've recently joined the Infra project the past month. So I'm catching up on a lot of things that a lot of the great work that you guys are doing. Yeah, so I'm happy to talk about some of the things I've been looking into on the SIG release side. Stephen, do you?
Hello? Yes.
Hello, do you want to segue into the test infra things that we wanted to discuss, or do we have something else on the agenda?
Yeah, that would be a good thing to talk about. I think for the community in general, I mean, eventually we have to draft a document to tell people how to do it. But then obviously for developers, we want to know, well, we want to know what you have done, what how proud that works, and then particularly how would people, I guess, hook up the unit tests and things into a pre-submit. That would be a great way to talk about this. Yeah, go ahead.
Right. So yeah, Stephen, I'll take your help in presenting. Since I'm not able to share at this time, I'm joining through phone. So yeah, maybe if we can go to the GitHub repository, the Nephew project.
So let me organize my windows.
Yes, of course, yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Here we go. Can you guys see the screen?
Yes, I can. Can you make it bigger?
It's moving, at least, right?
Yeah, yes, seems okay. So
we
added a test infra. No, yeah, both. Maybe if we can open two tabs. One is test infra and the other is TestPro project. Yeah, I've spent like a little bit of time playing around with these things, so I just wanted to share what's going on here. So maybe we can start with the test infra project, the other tab, and then we can switch back and forth. Yeah. So the idea here is this. So for Kubernetes, if you guys check, we also have a similar project called Test Infra. So that's where the naming, at least convention, comes from. So the goal of this repo is for us to maintain, as it said in the about section, we will maintain the Test Infra configuration. For example, in this case, PROW, TIDE, and so on. And other tools that we potentially will develop in the future, at least on the test infrastructure side, will potentially be maintained here. At least that's the proposal. So if you, Stephen, if you can click on the folder, PROW cluster folder. So this is the initial commit, right? Just with the cluster configuration. So before that, I just want to understand, like, is everyone in the call familiar with PROW? Can we assume that, or do we need to at least briefly introduce PROW?
I'm not familiar with it, to be honest. So it would be good.
Okay.
Use it a little bit.
Okay. So maybe we can.
Time. I know. Can it be introduced here, like like a presentation or something?
Yeah, I mean, definitely we could do that. For now, I'll just give a high level view because I haven't done anything. I don't have a formal presentation. Neither am I the expert in Pro or anything like that, but I can definitely share whatever information I have. Even we can do it today. I can share some high level, and then depending on how detailed we want to go, maybe we can have another presentation where we spend more time on Pro.
Cool.
How does that sound? Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. Sorry, I have to really leverage and bother Steven today since I'm throwing through mobile. Steven, if you can click on the, if you can, so this is the Pro. This is where all the configuration for the Kubernetes is set up for Pro. But because we're also trying to familiarize ourselves with Pro, maybe Steven, if you can type Pro architecture in Google, and we can. I mean, I think the Pro open source team have put together a high level like architecture diagram. We can at least take a look. Yeah, Pro architecture or something like that should show up. Yeah, that one, first one. Yep. Yep. So there would be a diagram at high level. Yeah. So so there are several Pro components. Like for us, we don't have to know all the internal like Pro infrastructure implementation details. I think what matters to us is just the high level concepts, right? And then how we can leverage Pro, right? But if folks are interested, I mean, this documentation is elaborate and you can go and understand like each of the different components, right? But in principle, the way Pro works is, so we have a GitHub project, right? And what we are trying to accomplish is that anytime we create a pull request, what we want is we have pre-submits, post-submits, and all the different tests that we want to run, right, for every pull request. So we want a test because if we want to run those tests, we need some compute resources, right? So Pro gives us exactly that. So Pro gives us a compute test infrastructure where we can run all our pre-submits, post-submits, and so on, right? So in this, if you see the GitHub box over the left, right? So that's our GitHub project. The way it works is for Nefio, we would set up a bot in GitHub. We're calling it Nefio Pro, for example, right? And this Nefio Pro bot is responsible for sending all the notifications towards the Pro infrastructure cluster. The Pro cluster we will be running on Google Cloud. So for Nefio, along with Linux Foundation, we have set up a GCP project, right? In that project, we'll be running a Kubernetes cluster, which hosts the Pro infrastructure for us, right? And so Steven, if you can open a browser and type in pro.nefio.io, please. So this is the pro.nefio.io, yep. .io. Yep. So this is the, I mean, test, the initial test website, if you will, for the Pro hosting. So you can see that the way this worked was anytime a pull request, like in this case, I was just playing with it, right? Like if you see, so there is a pull request that I kind of created on this TestPro project, Nefio TestPro project. And the moment I created the pull request, the GitHub would have sent a hook or a post request towards the Pro infrastructure that we are hosting. And basically what we did was in the GitHub app, we had told the GitHub app, hey, when a pull request is created, send a notification towards pro.nefio.io, this domain. And once that notification is sent, then we had configured a set of jobs, if you will. Those are the pre-submit and the post-submit jobs, which would be triggered on this pull request, right? So that's what you see here. There is a test. These are just dummy tests, but there is a test pre-submit and test post-submit that Steven is kind of highlighting there, which were run. Yeah, so that's the, and so there are different kinds of jobs we can create. We can go into the details as well. Like there is a pre-submit, post-submit. We can also schedule periodic jobs with Pro, where every 2 hours or so, whatever the cadence is, we can run some job in this infrastructure, right? So if we can go back to the TestPro project, I want to show, we could go into the architecture details at a different presentation. I just want to show how folks can use it first. If we can go to the TestPro project, and if you can go to the pull request, Stephen, please.
And so
And
maybe Arvind,
yeah,
the question, the test, the pre-test and the post-test, who creates them? Is it created by the Proud team or by the release team? And these are tests which are generic, or do we have to, do they have to be updated by the PR that you create or something like that? Or is it, this is general test that we as Nephew define?
right. So there are two, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, there are two pieces to this, I suppose. One is the infrastructure piece itself, that as a community we need to maintain, right? Like, because what will happen is, like I said, PRO is just a test infrastructure, right? Like, which kind of gets the notifications from GitHub and kind of schedules these jobs, if you will. For example, if you define a pre-submit job, it has to run in some compute resource, right? So it needs to be container. What PRO does is containerizes that job and runs it in the cluster that we are running. So that's all PRO does. PRO doesn't have a clue on what is the contents of the pre-submit job, right? So it just creates a container and runs in the compute resource that PRO was configured with. But then, so that's one part of it that we as a community need to maintain, the PRO infrastructure itself. And that's what we saw in the test infra repo, right? There was a bunch of configuration files, secrets, all the Kubernetes stuff we have to manage as a team, right? The other piece to this is the tests themselves. What it gets run as part of pre-submit, post-submit periodic depends on what test environment we set up, right? Like, for example, in one summit, we had kind cluster and things of that nature, right? So for that, you might want a specific set of tests to be run, right? So then we need to write or point PRO to those specific scripts as part of the pre-submit and post-submit. So those specifics we need to decide as a team and write the specifics. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, yes. So those tests, who should write them is the person. So they are written by the Nephew group generically. And these are things that we always have to pass, or they are part of, let's say, okay, let's take an example. I changed my IPAM, right? And okay, then we had a stand-up Nephew 1 summit. Let's a bunch of tests they run. So I create a new IPAM release with a bunch of changes. I just run to the regular IPAM, but I'm also expecting that I need to add module testing and stuff like that to the, let's call it the IPAM repo, to ensure that I have coverage for my own piece. So so my question basically is, the PRO tests, they are written by, they are generic Nephew related tests independent necessarily of IPAM. IPAM could be consumed by them, but they are not specific to it. Right?
Yeah, so this sounds
Yes.
like more like that sounds like more like a integration test.
Or system
let's say we
tests.
automated that. Yes, let's say we
system-
automated that in this case because the repo is not hooked up with your IPAM repo. We'll probably have to run this more of a periodic thing. Let's say daily, right? For argument's sake. So for that day, if day 1 and day 2 we find breakage, that means your check into IPAM between day 1 and day 2 actually break Nephew. But Nephew would be the one maintaining the integration test. Nephew community.
So in other words, to say it differently is, let's say we have the one summit thing that we install. We would have to write a bunch of scripts to see, or a test to make sure that they are run. And that's the baseline for these pre and post submit tests.
Yeah, that probably would be that would probably be the integration or periodic test, system test that will run.
Kind of a system test framework as far as I need.
Right. I mean, so there are a few things, right? Like Stephen mentioned as well. If we have different components, let's say IPAM is one component and package. I'm just giving an example based on one summit. Let's say the NF injector controller is another component. We have to configure PRO to monitor each of these repos independently, right? So this specific setup that I was playing with was specifically for Nephew TestPro project, but you can imagine for IPAM you will have a GitHub hook. to Prow. And similarly, you
Okay.
will have, for IPAM injector controller, you will have it hooked. And then what qualifies as pre-submit and post-submit is up for the component owners to decide, right? So that will not be whoever is maintaining the infrastructure in the community, they won't concern themselves with the specifics of what goes as pre-submit, what qualifies as pre-submit, what qualifies as post-submit is mostly the component owner's responsibility. It's just that we as a community and SIG Release, what we will enforce is you should have unit tests and component tests, you should have pre-submit tests, you should have post-submit tests, and you should have good test coverage, right? So those are the things that probably SIG Release will enforce. But the specifics probably will not matter that much to the SIG Release on what exactly and how we are testing it. But of course, we will have we will work together with the component owners to kind of define that.
But in other words, just to put it right. So normally when in a Go project, right, you write a bunch of Go tests that go with it to test the coverage of your code, if you will. So that's one component. I see Prow more into the consumption of your application rather than the individual code that lives inside of it. Is my understanding right or not?
So we can tell Prow to run like any test that we want. We can ask Prow to run the unit test also, right? Like a bunch of unit tests could be part of, because the idea is, let's say we are creating a pull request. We want to make sure without unit testing, we don't commit that pull request, right? So we want that to be part of it, but we cannot assume that all the developers will kind of do that, right? So pre-submit, you can point it to like a bunch of unit tests, component tests that we write, and that has to get, pre-submit has to pass before you can even merge your pull request. So that's a requirement that we will place for each of the repos. And all the unit tests that we write should be included in the pre-submit.
Okay.
At a minimum, right? And beyond unit tests, we should also have integration tests, but we need to figure out the details on what the environment for that would be.
Okay. But would they replace my Go test that I typically have into the project, or they just consume them? Is that the way
they consume that? They consume that. Yeah. Now I get your question. Yeah. They kind of consume that, right? They are not going to replace anything. We write unit tests the way we write traditionally, right? It's just that you can think of Prow as,
consumer of it.
Yeah. Yes. It makes sure that all those tests are run before you make a submission. And yeah.
Okay.
So it's basically part of the job that's gonna be kick off. The job will run the test, right?
Exactly. Yes.
I'll jump in really quickly. I feel like there's a disconnect here. Prow will run any pod that you want. So anything you package will be your test. So it's entirely up to you. Whatever you put in the pod, that is the test. It's more of a CI/CD scheduling kind of tool. So yeah. But we're going to have to design our test harness, of course. I think that's part of the work, but Prow will just be the tool that triggers it automatically and keeps track of it. That's really all it does.
Okay.
Right, exactly. It just triggers the test and also gives you the compute resources for actually running the test. Those are the two things that Prow does.
Okay, just one question. It's being new to the Prow. Does it also analyze the code coverage with the unit test?
So that could be part of the unit test no, Prow doesn't do anything out of the box as far as I understand. It's just that, like Tal mentioned, right? We can add code coverage as one of the pre-submit tests. And
got it. So
we
will use whatever standard Kubernetes uses for the code coverage and run it.
Yeah, code coverage will be different tools. Yeah, because that's
yes.
the analysis tools. Yeah.
So just wanted to know whether it does natively or not. Thank you. Yeah.
We have to go back and check. Not to my knowledge, it doesn't. But like I said, I'm not the Prow expert, so we'll go and check if there is something native. Not that I know of.
Thank you.
Is there a preferred code coverage tool that the group is using already that we can adopt?
I think some native, for example, Go actually does have native code coverage that you can actually
Yeah.
invoke.
Yes.
Understood, but I'm wondering if, because there's a Google Nephew project, and I'm wondering if there are existing tooling that we can just adopt instead of, build it up from scratch. Try to
Yeah,
shortcut
if,
some of
if
the
their
work.
code is written in Go, they can make use of some of it, is what I believe. I'm only speaking from my experience from what we did for OV and Kubernetes. We have which was a joint project between NVIDIA and Red Hat. So we were using the Go tools itself. So here, I don't know what other programming languages are being used other than Go. So that's what I think. That is my knowledge. So maybe.
Yeah, we can probably investigate what Kubernetes uses. We've been following them a lot.
Yeah.
Exactly. I can update the
How
document.
is used by Kubernetes, the project. So that's why we're trying to follow the conventions, right? But we're going to have to create our own end-to-end testing harnesses and things like that, of course, because we're unique.
Yep. It just across several projects, open source and internal, I keep running into this issue, right? Of setting up test harnesses and all the infrastructure work that goes with it. So I'm looking to shortcut some of that here, so we don't have to repeat ourselves. But whatever.
We'd love to learn your experience on if there's something you can present to us of what you've learned and what we shouldn't do and should do. That would be great, I think.
Okay.
Yep.
I'll think about it and try to come up with something. But yeah.
So code
Yeah, I
coverage
mean,
is-
in Go, there are coverage tools, right? That's built into the language and libraries, but usually it's more than that that's needed. That's the
Yeah,
Yeah,
problem.
from the unit testing coverage perspective, that's the straightforward. We could either use direct go to, like Vish mentioned,
Yeah.
or investigate something else. But setting up the test harness, especially for the integration and system test purposes, that's a whole different thing altogether.
Exactly.
That is very
Mhm.
different. The unit test is you're just testing your unit, that may be a single method or a single structure that we have defined. That is, the boundaries are well defined. So you're everything, most of the things you're mocking there. But for that one, I don't think we need any kind of a harness kind of setup. But integration and system test is where those things will come into the picture, and that's where I think that's what I think Arvind was mentioning. We'll be tackling that later, I guess, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, right. I mean, so right now we have just played with Pro as an infrastructure, right? Like how to set up. But of course, as we move towards, for unit testing, I don't think we need to do much. It's just that we need to configure Pro to run those unit tests. But then if you're talking integration tests, that's a little bit more complicated, right? Like we need to have the right environment to run that. So that we need to tackle at some point.
Yeah.
Can we also make it watch something outside of our own repo? So at Vim's point, if we have if his IPAM repo is actually not a Nephew repo, so
Yeah,
if he
it can be
maintains it on the outside, so
Yes.
the Prow from Nephew watches the Vim IPAM, and then if the check-in that comes in, obviously we're not going to influence their pre-commit, so they will still commit. I mean, Vim will still commit, and then what is that trigger? That would basically be something like a post-commit test.
Yeah, just so
Stephen, isn't it which version of that IPAM is consumed? Isn't it? Are we going to define it in our Go modules? So basically, until we change our modules, there should be no change.
I see.
I mean, that's
So
what I'm
let me-
thinking. Is it not the case?
there are a
Because
lot
we
of
are consuming our dependencies based on our Go, unless we say latest.
Yeah, so so that becomes a manual process. So we are monitoring Vim's IPAM, and then if there's any changes to it, we'll say, hey, let's update the modules and make it a test
Yeah,
against our thingy, our test suites, and then unless it passes, so that sounds like a pretty manual process. So I just wonder whether or not this Prow has any
So just to
well-known
be-
things that help out.
I mean, just to be
I
clear,
mean-
right? Like I think Prow can monitor any repo.
Mhm.
So the only thing is, if we need to go check if merging into that repo is okay, because for example, we are going to show a little bit later that there is something called as tide, which is kind of a friend of Prow, if you will, and it helps merge these pull requests back into the main branch based on some preset conditions. If those conditions satisfy, then Tide will merge this pull request into the main branch by itself, right? So those things we need to figure out, right? Like Prow can of course monitor, run the tests that we need to run for IPAM2, but whether we also want to configure Tide to merge it is a question. But if we want to do that, should be possible, I think. I think Tal was trying to get a point across. Tal?
Yeah, sorry, I just yeah, it is not a problem at all to add other Git repositories. Internally, Prow is kind of interesting. It has clients for a long list of things that you can hook, from GitHub to Slack commands to Bugzilla and Jira, but all of them internally get translated as if they come from GitHub. They use GitHub events internally because I think that's how the project started, being GitHub centric, but it's not GitHub centric anymore. I mean, we can even use the Slack client to say, hey, test everything, please, or whenever we want. So there's, yeah, the hooks, we can attach, we can view any GitHub repository. It does not have to be our repositories. It could be something external. It's really up to us where we want. So on the one hand, we have triggers, sorry, hooks that that trigger the event, but once the event happens, we can run anything we want. It's just anything we put in a container gets run. So it's just the mechanism. We have to decide ourselves what we want to run in those containers.
Exactly. So I think going, oh, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Arun. My question is, if we are, yeah, that's absolutely good to know. I mean, it can track other repos, and we can create events and run jobs based on the events. That's fine. But my fundamental question was, how are we consuming codes from other repos? Are we consciously consuming them by version? If that's the case, then even though, for example, IPAM is a dependency on a dependency for Nephew, and if version changes from 0.1 to 0.2, for example, so would we automatically consume it, or is it going to be a conscious decision where we go change our go mod file to fetch the latest one, test it, create a PR against it, and then merge it in our code? Basically, now at that point of time, go mod will have 0.2 version, and that's a very conscious decision. So which way do you all think we are going when it comes to dependency management?
I can give my 2 cents on this. I think we want to base it on versions, right? Like for any, and like take this IPAM example, right? For every single commit, we don't want to probably pull and integrate and test, right? Like we want to make sure it's at the logical point, and it is like a Git tag based version mechanism. Like you gave an example, right? V0.1, 0.2. We want to pull at some logical points like that, that we agree on in SIG release and SIG automation, right? So that's my take on it. I'll let others chime in as well.
Yeah, I think I'm used to what you just said. It needs to be tagged, which means whoever is monitoring.
The problem is that the problem not with tagging, that if it fails, let's say you tag, you run the test, you have to move the tag to the later release. Is that how you want to do it, or?
2 things, right? Like first, that individual repo itself, the repo owner, the SIG release, whoever is managing that individual repo itself will make sure that V0.2 is stable, right? Because they would have run pre-submit, post-submit. I'm assuming, Wim, your question is, when we integrate and test it, in integration test, if it fails, what happens? Is that your question?
Yeah, so first of all, you have the owner who tested, so they have their own, or they access the Prow server before they tag it, I'm assuming, right? Then they tag it, let's say there is a later problem experiencing, then yeah, then we have to go back and retag the thing, I am assuming, right?
So the tag is on that repo, right? So they are saying that, I'm assuming, let's say you want to
say 011 or 100 or whatever, yeah.
Right, it's based on features, right? If there are n features, I mean, they would have tagged it based on their understanding that these features are now supported in this IPAM, for example, right? And you tag it. After that, people pull it, and so that's the part we can work on, right? Like, of course, people pull it, it might fail, then we need to patch, right? Like we need to fix and patch. So v0.2 that we released, let's say IPAM, let's say it had a couple of issues, and that was found during integration testing. Then we go back to v0.2 and patch that v0.2 with those fixes, right? And then make it work along with the integration test. And then that will become the official v0.2 with the patch release. Call it 0.2.1 now.
Yeah, you have to change
patching.
the tag. And my point is, do you move the tag or you change? You update the version, I guess, right?
Yeah, because there is we will follow the semantic versioning that Kubernetes follows, right? X.Y.Z, where X is the major, Y is the minor, and Z is for patches. So in your example, 0.2.0 would be the first release. Let's say we found integration issues, we fix it, it becomes 0.2.1. And 1 year patch. Yep.
Yeah. Thanks, Arvind. That's very well explained. Just to add to Arvind's point, so when we do the integration testing, we may find issues, incompatible things in Nephew. There could be no issues in IPAM itself. So there will be no changes to the IPAM, but some of the things in Nephew could change in order to work with 0.2 tag version of IPAM. So that's also a valid case, at which point of time, again, all those things will be taken care by the regular PR process.
Exactly. It's integration issue, right? It's not necessarily, one repo. It's more of an integration issue that we need to solve, maybe at both sides or just one side.
Exactly. Yeah. Well put. Yeah.
But so I think there is.
Well, I have a question.
Sorry. Yeah. Maybe.
Sorry, Wim. I have a question regarding how Pro is integrated with GitHub. So just in case that we, for some reason, we have to move to GitLab, for example, how hard is to do that transition? I mean, probably Kubernetes and that have never thought about that possibility, but what about if we have to move away from GitHub and start using something else like GitLab? Do you think that it's going to be hard to switch that, or like to not depend too much on GitHub, or that could be one of the disadvantages to using Pro?
So is the question, sorry, I did not understand the question. Just for I may not have the answer, but just to understand the question, are you saying that is well, if Nephew moves from GitHub to GitLab, or are you suggesting Nephew in GitHub consuming artifacts from GitLab?
No, well, if we have that, for some reason to do that transition, do we have any issues to still using Pro and all the infrastructure, or like we have to think about another solution besides Pro? That's my question. So Pro is tightly related with GitHub, so if we have that kind of vendor lock-in, or it's not a problem to move away from GitHub? I'm not suggesting to move for an hour. Yeah.
Victor, that's a very fair question. I don't have the answer to that. If it also supports, other open source collaboration platforms. But if anybody else on the call knows the answer to that, then please chime in. If not, I'll of course go back to the Proud team, check, and come back. If there is any plan for future support for anything beyond GitHub, or maybe they're already supporting it. I'm not completely sure about that.
Yeah, because usually the way that I have seen. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I think not. I think Victor, your assumption is right. It's very tightly integrated into GitHub.
I just shared an issue. It seems that it's an issue to support it or something like that. I think I just found it to make it integrated, but I think it's open, so I don't think it exists yet.
No, but I thought also to Victor's point, right? Like we should go back to the Proud team and just check if they have anything on the roadmap, even if it's not supported as of today, right? Which is something we should definitely do. I'll go back and check with the Proud team on that. So by the way, Proud is also an open source project, right? So they have their own Slack. Feel free to get involved and ask questions there as well. I'm sure the team would be happy to answer.
Yeah. Although I just found on archive that Proud and GitLab seems to work together, by the way.
Oh, is that the link you shared?
Oh, there's another one. I just found. Let me share this one. That they say that or there was a talk from someone, I don't know, I haven't listened to it, of course, but they try to make GitLab Brow work together. So
I imagine it would be awkward. It really proud depends on like the GitHub event structure. It's yeah.
I don't know what they
somebody
did.
Same integration work for GitLab.
Yeah, and also how well tested is any other like GitLab. I imagine we don't want to be the first one starting it, right? There'll be a lot of onboarding issues. So if it's not tried and tested, I would stay away from it.
Well, I will say that a very simple solution that, let's say you're working on GitLab, if you can mirror it on GitHub, which is pretty trivial, then that can be your workaround. And you can use private repos on GitHub too, if there's an issue with publicity.
Sure.
One way that I have seen others have mitigated that particular vendor lock-in issue is like trying to develop other CI tasks, having that in mind. Like all the things are like they are trying to avoid any particular specialized feature. Like for example, they put everything in the bash scripts, and in that way they can be portable enough for using whatever other solution.
So just to be clear, right? The test that. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Sorry, apologies. There was a lag, so didn't mean to overspeak. No, I was just going to say the tests that we write themselves are not Proud dependent, right? The tests themselves are, test infrastructure agnostic, if you will, right? Proud is just the compute platform. I just wanted to put that out there.
I'm wondering if for the Nephew project itself, we are committed to GitHub, right? I mean, we're not switching. This is more of an exploratory question.
Well, yes and no, because for example, OpenNSD community uses GitLab. At some point, I guess they have faced that transition from their using their own infrastructure to using GitLab. So I don't know. Yeah, probably it's an exploratory question right now, but maybe it could be potential.
Victor, do you know what they're using for testing for CI/CD?
For the CI/CD, I know that some projects like XCI, they have their own lab and internally, like using Jenkins and all these tooling. But given that they have to maintain all these things, it's very hard. That's why they decided to switch to something public like GitLab. They didn't. I don't know why they didn't consider GitHub. So yes, but they are kind of a mix in that approach. Like some of the executions are triggering to create some. I mean, they are hosting all the source code in GitLab, but most of the actions are executed in their own data center. So, but they are not using Jenkins in that approach. So it's kind of Frankenstein.
So to be honest, the answer he gave before is pretty good. I think that, look, the tests are not Proud specific, right? So assuming somebody wants to create their own internal integration testing based on the Nephew integration test that we will write, they could potentially hook it up to another system, right? These are just containers. They can run them any way they wish, right? So I don't think we're precluding anybody from creating a CI/CD platform based on our work. Yeah, I just wonder how big a problem this would be for potential users who are not using GitHub. Right, I imagine too, so let's say there are companies, parties who want to create their own implementation of Nephew internally. and want to do testing. And of course, they'll have to extend testing with their own proprietary work for their own products, their own network functions, their own platforms. They'll probably be using a lot of their internal testing already anyway. They probably already have a lab with some certification and testing process. So I kind of doubt that whatever open source tool that we would provide or support that they would be using. They would probably have to integrate the tests internally. That is my guess. So yeah.
Even for that test case that you are mentioning, I guess GitHub and GitLab has great tooling like the GitHub Runners, so which is pretty nice. Like you can extend it to run certain testing workloads in your own environment. So yeah.
Right, and you know, those are actually based on Azure, right? Microsoft is providing those VMs for running the test there. So that's the infrastructure. Yeah, to an extent, that's also available, right? And then, of course, that's far more tied to GitHub than even Porches. Yeah. I think the advantage of Porch is that it's cloud native, right? The GitHub, you have to write your own kind of GitHub test code and host it somewhere. But with Porch, you can put everything as a container, and the jobs themselves are Kubernetes resources. So, oops, sorry about that.
You mean Prao, right? Just me.
Oh yeah, sorry. I'm sorry. I do confuse the names sometimes. Yes, I was talking about Prao. Porch is unrelated to this discussion. I apologize for that. Yeah. So Prao is you can think of it as the GitHub Actions, but it's cloud native and much more Kubernetes based.
Yeah. In fact, if you check that, if you check the test infra repo, all the YAML files there are just Kubernetes KRM CRDs basically. So the way you configure Prao is also through CRDs.
Yeah. So do you have an example? For example, if you, let's say you have a repo, what would you have to do for to make Prao work in your, let's say, a single repo? Do you have that somewhere? Is that in the?
Yeah. So yeah, Stephen, if you can switch. Sorry, if you don't mind switching to the test infra.
TestPro project.
Yeah, no, TestPro is the user. Test infra is the thing, right? So if we can go through the contents. I'm just trying to remember which one is being more relevant. So let's see. Could you look at config generic? I wonder if that's where the tests are listed. The second one from the top.
Oh, that one.
Yeah, if you go down all the way, is this where tied? Yeah, so if you see here, and again, the way we have configured it right now is very much like a toy thing, right? Like we have to be a little bit more organized in how we structure our files. Like if we are going to use this as like a full-blown productionized solution, right? But for now, let's go with this. So if you see here, what we have said is there's a line called pre-submit, post-submit, and post-submit, below that, we are pointing it to the repo where we wanted to run the post-submit test for. And right now it's doing nothing, right? It's, as you can see here, it's a container which is running Alpine image and just printing the environment variable, nothing. But if you want to do something meaningful, then you can do the same thing, except under the container, you point it to the right image or right set of scripts that you want to point it to. And right above, if you look at from line 72 to 79, that's how you configure periodic jobs. There is a keyword called periodics, and then you can configure the periodics job that way. So you can list any repo that you want here, and you will see Prao pick it up, like even now.
And that's but the tests. So from that private repo, let's say TestPro project here, do you have to basically identify the tests, or you basically they run all the tests based on the make file you have in the project, or how does that get triggered?
Yeah, we have to call everything out. Like whatever we wanted to run, we need to point it to the right set of tests. So I don't have a working example for that. Maybe what we can do is like this is just a POC, right? Like maybe we can have a real or close to real repo where there are unit tests, and we can create a Prao config to kind of run those unit tests so that folks can see, take a look and do something similar. I don't have a working example for that, Wim, at this point.
Okay. Well, I just want to understand how the two hooks together and yeah, how do you link them?
Right. Yeah. Maybe it might be beneficial if we talk with an example, right? I don't want to misrepresent something that Proud does. So maybe we'll have a working example for that, and then we can share in one of the SIG release meetings as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to work with you on an example or something if you want.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, happy to collaborate.
Where we run a unit test. Yeah.
Yes. We can work together, definitely. So yeah, we have 5 minutes. I just want to show one quick thing. So Stephen, if you don't mind, could you please go to the TestPro project and go to the pull request section, and let's look at one of the closed pull requests there. So yeah, if you can change to is closed in the search bar. Yeah, this is open, right? So I just want to show one small thing. So if you click on the first one, yeah. So for example, right? So this is I was just playing with this, right? So I created a repo, and I created a dummy account which is RA Arvin254. So that account was the reviewer for this pull request that I created. So that owner had both approver and reviewer permission. So the way Pro manages this ownership is through the owner's file in the repo, in the TestPro project repo. And based on that, it would have identified who are the reviewers. And when you create a pull request, it will auto add reviewers. Like in this case, if you see, I just created a pull request. And if you see at the timeline, it says Nephew Pro bot requested a review from RA Arvin 254 3 hours ago, right? You see that line. So it sent that, right? And then because I was also the approver, meaning the author was also the approver, it added the approver label automatically. But it still needs, looks good to me, LGTM label from the reviewer before it can merge, right? And if you scroll down, yeah, and there you see RA Arvin 254 gave the LGTM for this pull request. After that was done, Rao added the LGTM label to this pull request, right? So now you see two labels, approved and LGTM label. After that, if you can click on the view details, Stephen, like right at the bottom.
View detail. This.
Nephew, no, not that. Below, Nephew Pro bot merged commit into main 3 years. So keep going down. I'm sorry.
This.
Yeah, exactly. So you see, it shows what are the tests that were run, like test post submit succeeded, pre-submit succeeded. And the interesting thing is Nephew Pro also merges this into the master branch for you. You don't have to go and issue a git command to merge or anything. It will even merge the pull request for you. But you can configure Tide to do that or not do that, right? Like in this case, we have configured it to do it. And the criteria is you need to see labels approved and LGTM, for example. If it's approved, it's LGTM'd, all the pre-submit and all the tests pass, then it will merge into the master repo, which is what Tide does. And the benefit I'm hearing from folks is that Tide kind of optimizes for resources. It has many benefits. One of the benefits they're saying is that it can group a bunch of pull requests and then merge them as a pool. Like for example, that's why you will see, I don't know if it's mentioned somewhere here that yeah, Tide in merge pool. I think once the pull request is in a state, it'll go to the merge pool, and then Tide has some cadence where it will group a bunch of pull requests and run a test together. Because you can imagine if many folks are collaborating, it'll be a lot of resources, right? Like that Pro infrastructure needs to support. Because for each PR, if you create a container, you can imagine the resourcing demand on the infrastructure, right? Instead, if you group these PRs together and run a post submit that way, maybe there are some optimizations to be had in terms of container usage or compute usage rather. So that's what Tide does for you, which can be configured as well. And Tide configuration is also in the test infra repo. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'll stop there. Go ahead.
No, so the label approved is actually is provided when like the core reviewers approve the PR. Is that when it gets applied?
Yes. So similar to you see /LGTM here, like in this case, I was the author. I was also an approver. So approved got added. But you can imagine, let's say there is a project where you are the approver. Only you have the approver rights and reviewer rights, let's say, and I'm the author. I create the project. And when let's say you are reviewing the code, you have to do like /LGTM here. and also /approve. And then once you put that there, it will get added as a label. And at that point, the PR is ready to merge.
So, Arvind, on the point that you mentioned about the efficiency of merging, not merging, the combining PRs to before merging, right, with the PR process, with the tool tied. There's a couple of questions that comes to my mind. One is obvious. What if there are conflicts between multiple PRs? How that is handled? Yes. That is one thing. The second thing is, if it runs tests together for multiple PRs at once, what would be the fidelity of individual PRs in terms of its sanity?
Right. No, those are very valid questions. Yeah. We are out of time. Should we address this question now, or I can maybe briefly talk about it, right? Just a minute. So if there are merge conflicts, from what I mean, I have not personally played with it enough to clearly answer that, but my understanding is that we have to manually go and resolve that, because obviously Tide cannot do that for us, right? So that's one. And if you batch, if I understand you correct, if there are two PRs and we are batching and running post submit, if it fails, how will you know which one caused the failure, right?
Right.
That part, right. that part also, yeah, I need to understand if, sorry, I'm getting kicked out of the room. Yeah, we can discuss more on that if it's okay on the next meeting. Sorry, I'm losing the room, so I cannot.
Well, we have time anyway, so I guess it seems like we need another sessions to talk about this.
Thanks,
I mean, I don't know when we should do this, you know, on not another 2 weeks, because there's,
yeah,
I would imagine this is probably around time where folks starting to make Nephew repos officials and starting to have a CI/CD pipeline.
Yeah, maybe we can continue discussion on the Slack channel.
Yeah. Cool.
And then somebody come up with a concrete proposal next meeting, like how are we gonna use the GitHub?
Yes. So for that, we also have created a SIG release repository. If you see, there is not much contents there, but the idea is to specify, I mean, like you were saying, right? In general, the development process and all those things and the release cadence and everything will eventually be documented there in the SIG release repository.
Okay.
Just in future.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Yeah, we can discuss about more on the Slack. Like,
yeah,
it's a lot of them.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you
so much.
Thank you,
quickly before we hang up, are we moving forward with Proud then? And what are the next steps if we are?
I thought that was the decision was already made. That's why we actually invest time to building it. Yeah, yeah.
So what are the next steps we're gonna do with this?
Well, so SIG2 would have to come up with a list of components, so because we have to come up with a list of repositories that would for different component owners, and we'll run Prowl and make Prowl available on running. So we'll be running on some GKE clusters owned by Nephew, and then folks that the owners of the components of that repo would have to actually define what their own unit test pre-submit framework is, and then in terms of cross different component repos testing and validations, this is something we have to talk about in here moving forward.
Yep.
So one other thing that I want to, I'm so sorry, real quick, I want to add is we would also, if folks are interested in collaborating on, the test infrastructure, there's a lot of work to go around. So I'm happy to share those details, because whatever we have set up is just like a proof of concept, right? But to really maintain a infrastructure is quite a bit of work. So so we can work together on that. I'm happy to collaborate with whoever is interested.
Do you mind listing the issue in GitHub or
yes. No, Right, exactly, right. So we will do all that. Like, we will make sure to figure out the issues, and then maybe we can pick up one of the SIG release meetings or even Slack channels to kind of discuss those, and then see how collaborate. In the meantime, I mean, if folks are interested, there is the Pro architecture document. If you Google the first link, maybe take a look and we can discuss that as well. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it. Oh, well, have a good time. See you guys in 2 weeks. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Nice to meet you.
Bye.
Bye.